Okay, hello everyone. We're June 8th, 2026. It's 7 p.m. We're at the Genoa Township Hall. Agenda items today is zoning case 2026-02, Romanelli and Hughes Building Corporation, the first meeting. Staff present tonight is Joe Schaefer, Director of Development and Zoning, and Simon Bell, Deputy Zoning Inspector. You want to do the roll call, Jim?
Yes. Roll call, Mr. Adler. Here. Ms. Krieger.
Here.
Mr. Bernard.
Present.
Mr. Tysman.
Present.
Ms. Van Houw.
Present.
And I'll note that Mr. Geis is here as well. Mr. Leff is absent. He did inform us that that would be the case.
I will read out the statement of policy that was adopted by this commission. This meeting may be recorded. Such recordings are public records, may be posted online, and could be subject to review in courts. As is the adopted policy of the Zoning Commission, all applicants will be granted an opportunity to make their formal presentation. The audience may then be granted an opportunity to comment, followed by applicants' response and questions from the commission. The chairperson may limit repetitive debate and reserve the following rights: to limit comment to items on the agenda, to limit public comment to 5 minutes per person, to restrict the number of times a member of the public is permitted to speak, and to enact any other reasonable ad hoc protocols and measures necessary to maintain a fair, safe, and orderly meeting. This policy was adopted by the Commission to provide for the respectful, constructive, and efficient discussion of business scheduled for consideration and to allow for proper due process as required by law. I think, we're going to discuss the minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion for the minutes?
I will.
Marcy,
I first.
you move to approve
I move to approve the May 11th, 2026 meeting minutes
as presented?
as
Second.
presented.
Okay. Discussion? Anyone? Roll call?
Roll call, Mr. Adler.
Approve.
Ms. Krieger.
Approve.
Mr. Tysman.
Approve.
Ms. Van Houw. Mr. Bernard.
Approve. Okay. Minutes. Moving on to the public hearing. Romanelli and Hughes Building Company requesting approval of a final development plan to construct 150 single-family dwellings on approximately 129.43 acres, generally located west of Rome Corners Road, including 3570 Rome Corners Road, pin 3172-100-500-3000, 3774 Rome Corners Road, pin number 3172-1005-00-8000, and 3172-1005-00-9000. 3912 Rome Corners Road, pin number 3172-1005-00-8001, and 3922 Rome Corners Road, pin number 3172-1005-01-0001, and Rome Corners and 3990 Rome Corners Road, pin number 3172-1005-01-0000. Currently zoned planned residential district, PRD, also known as Mira Luna, zoning case number 2026-02. Anyone who wants to speak on this project, please rise to be sworn in. Anyone else from the public that wants to speak? Please, yeah. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. The legal notice for this meeting was published on May 27, 2026, on Township social media accounts in accordance with Ohio law and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on May 27, 2026. An attempt to mail notice of this hearing to property owners within 500 feet of the subject property was also made. The following will be marked as Exhibits A to I. Exhibit A, legal notice. Exhibit B, proof of advertisements. Exhibit C, sign-in sheets. Exhibit D, application and plans. Originally received May 4, 2026, revised June 5, 2026. Exhibit E, fire marshal correspondence dated May 12, 2026, Exhibit F, staff memo dated June 8, 2026. Exhibit G, staff technical review dated June 8, 2026. Exhibit A, all public comments received by the zoning department between May 4th, 2026 and June 2026, June 8, 2026, sorry. And then I'll take it to Joe Schaefer for a staff report.
Thank you, and I apologize, in our script, there is no Exhibit I. We forgot to amend that part, so there's Exhibits A through H, so my mistake.
Okay.
Since the chair already read the legal notice, it's a rather lengthy memo. It's 9 pages plus the technical review, and I don't want to bore everyone or take an hour to read it. So I'm going to skip through some of the stuff that was already included. Simon, it looks like we lost connection.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, so please bear with us and try not to tune into Netflix while I'm giving my presentation. We're dealing with 6 parcels here, west side of Rome Corners Road, largely farm, couple ponds on it, some single-family homes which would be demolished, which we'll get into momentarily. But as the legal notice noted, it's almost 130 acres, 150 units, one of which is a lot where there was an existing house, which we'll get into momentarily as well. The development is utilizing the conservation development standards under the zoning resolution. It would consist of 64, 62-foot wide patio home lots, 57, 80-foot wide single-family lots, 2,800-foot wide single-family lots, and then again, the remnant house. So speaking of the remnant house, I guess I'll dive into that first since it's a unique aspect of the plan and there's a change from what was presented. Simon, I'm actually going to ask you to bring up the site plan if you can. If you go back, click on the Mira Luna in the file path. Yep. Go to submissions. Yep. For submittal, go to the pre-meeting revisions folder, and then just illustrative plan is fine. And I just want to make sure that's the correct one. So down in the southeast corner of the site was a house that initially, when this came through for rezoning approval, the house was going to be retained. Since that time, the applicants decided that house should not be retained. They've decided, actually, I believe they've already gone ahead and demolished that house. And what they're actually going to do is, which is, I think this is the first I've seen this here, they're actually going to take one of the other homes that's on one of the other lots that's part of this development and actually relocate the home, as I presume it's nicer than the home that was demolished, to that site, if that makes any sense. So they actually won't be building a new house on that lot. They're actually just going to be relocating a house that's currently on the track to that lot, and that it would be its own individual lot. So that's probably, other than that, the layout, the street layout, the unit count, the acreage of this plan is all consistent with the rezoning. So, but I wanted to touch on that specific aspect because that was a change from the plan that the township had seen a few years ago. So speaking of a few years ago, I probably should get into the history here because I know we've got a lot of different new faces on the commission who weren't here when this plan initially went through a few years ago. So the rezoning preliminary development plan application was, and Simon, if this continues to just not work, that's okay. No, it's not your fault. We'll just have to turn the TVs off so they're not distracting. So, but anyway, sorry. The rezoning preliminary development plan application was submitted in September of 22, and it went through numerous revisions and iterations over several months. Regional planning voted on a recommendation on October 27th of 2022. The zoning commission, after, again, numerous revisions, voted to recommend approval of it in June of 23, actually almost 3 years to the day. The Board of Trustees voted to then approve yet another modified version of the plan in December, of 2023. And then it got through the referendum period without any referendum being passed, and so the PRD rezoning went into effect in mid-January of 24. one of the things that sort of held them up from getting to this point sooner was getting the easements needed for the sanitary sewer that was going to be extended from Jaycox Road northward, parallel to 71, to service this site as well as other areas in the county. Took some time. The township acquired, as you know, the Freeman Farm property. We had gotten a grant to do that from the state, and one of the terms of the grant from the state was we were not even allowed to grant any easements for utility crossings without the state's blessing. So we did have to go to the state and ask for permission, which we got, and then the board had to vote to approve to authorize the easements both through Jaycox, the Sledding Hill parcel, as well as the Freeman's Farm parcel. So that took some time to get through, but we got there and it got done. And those easements were approved May of actually last year. So, and that work has since started on that sewer line. If you've been out there between Delco and the sewer project, you'll see a lot of dirt being moved. So, again, sorry, I probably should have done that part first, but that's sort of the history of the development we're dealing with here. So, they had 3 years to get the final application in, so they were coming up on it at the end of this year. So it's good that we got it in plenty of time, and the commission's going to have, and the trustees will have enough time to review it before December. I also forgot to mention on this track, which is pretty readily evident, there is a telecommunication tower on the track. That's, if you look in the bottom right of the drawing that Simon was able to get pulled back up, you'll see like a circle in the middle. That's the fall zone for the tower that they're preserving. In the middle of that circle is the tower. The tower is actually now on its own little parcel. Originally, it was on just an easement on part of the larger farm parcel, but during the rezoning process, they went ahead and carved off the specific parcel that basically made up the bounds of that easement for that tower. That tower site's not included in any of the net developable calculations, the open space. It's going to remain functional, but sort of just be a little island in the plan. And that's not, we've seen that before. We have a couple other plans that have actually cell towers in them. They sort of blend into the background after a while. Forget they're there. So speaking of the current plan proposal, it's broken down into 2 sub-areas. The north end, which is about 64 and some change acres, fronting on Rome Corners Road with 77 lots, and then the southern end, which is sub-area B, is about 64 acres and consists of the 72 lots plus the remnant home lot. They're all going to be fee simple lots that will be platted. However, some will have condo-style maintenance that the applicant will get more into of the product type during their presentation. They've also broken down the plan into phases. I'm not going to get into reading all the numbers for all the phases, but they've worked in conjunction with the fire department on that phasing, because one of the things fire had concerns about was making sure, because it's a plan with 2 entrances, that construction happen in such a way that they don't get more than 30 units built and only have one way in and out, because that becomes a fire code issue. So I know even as of today, I was talking to the fire marshal about how they're going to phase that and plat it to make sure that public safety can be assured from that standpoint for those who would move into this plan. The developer anticipates it will take 3 to 5 years total to complete the plan if it's approved. There were numerous divergences approved as part of the preliminary plan that carry through to the final that the applicant has the rights to. One of the unique ones is the fact that this plan is actually being reviewed against an iteration of the zoning code that is now 2 iterations old. They got a divergence to authorize the final plan to proceed under the zoning code that was in effect at the time the rezoning was filed in 22. That code had an effective date of October 31st, 2020. So for anyone who's trying to compare the plan to the current zoning resolution is confused, that's why, because we're actually looking 2 versions back in terms of zoning codes, and that's not unheard of either. We've done that for a couple of prior plans that Mr. Romanelli has done here in the township over the years. Again, I'm not going to go through all the site statistics in the table. They're there. As you can see, what they're proposing is consistent with, if not exceeds, the rezone. You'll see some minor changes on acreage and density calculations, but we're talking about hundreds of decimal points that just are a result of when they finally get out in the field and do more detailed surveying and engineering of the site, they get more refined numbers, and that tends to tweak some of these numbers a little bit. But nothing outside of the norm of what we would typically see as part of that process. Open space actually, as a result, went slightly up from 50.1 to 50.4% of the tract. All the setbacks from all the perimeter lots in Rome Corners Road are still being maintained. Setbacks that they have around the stormwater ponds and the wetlands have all remained the same, the 20-foot buffers that are required. The access points are the same as what was part of the preliminary plan. Lot widths, lot areas, again, all the same. We do have some specific lot width and setback information now for that remnant lot on Rome Corners Road. One of the things staff was concerned about was how do we administer zoning on that, because it's not like all those other typical lots within the plan. So I've asked the applicant to make sure they give us setbacks and details specific to that lot. So going forward, we know how to handle administering zoning for that specific lot. We already talked about setbacks. The applicant agrees to comply with all the minimum square footage requirements, and I believe these homes are going to be similar to what we've seen in some of the other Romanellian plans, including Grace's Place and/or Reserve at Vinmar, which well exceed the minimum lot or square footage standards of all of these. They also have an exhibit for the driveway setback, the 40-foot plus requirement. That's in there. So I have no concerns there. Driveways are going to be paved. No concerns there. So now I'm going to dive into sort of the more specific areas of the plan. First, we're going to talk about access and traffic. We already talked about the access points under Rome Corners. There was a traffic study done for this plan. When the rezoning came through, it was approved by the engineer's office on May 5th of 23. I did talk, the Delaware County Engineer's Office, who reviews the traffic studies, has been reviewing the final engineering plans for this development over the past couple months. I did review the letter that we get copied on that they had sent to the applicant. Indicates this approval is, the approval of the traffic study rather, is still recognized and in effect. I was able to confirm that with Eric Mackling, the development review engineer up at the county, in a phone call a couple weeks ago, that they still consider the traffic study in effect and that they would not need to do a new study. I know things have changed a little bit out in that area since the rezoning happened. I think probably the biggest change out there was the Plum Creek development north of Plum Road up in Berkshire Township. I imagine since Plum Creek came after the rezoning for this plan, that any of Mira Luna's traffic impacts would have been known and taken in consideration when Plum Creek was then doing their study and their planning work. Also, it's my understanding that the county engineer does have a roundabout improvement plan for Plum and Rome Corners. So with the road work that will have to be done as part of this development project on Rome Corners, I imagine as part of that roundabout project, we'll see improvements to some degree on Plum Road corridor. To what, I don't know. I haven't seen those plans, but just like what we're seeing out here with the Tussock Big Walnut roundabout, you'll see those improvements tend to go beyond just the intersection itself, because they have to make sure it's safe leading up to those to that intersection. The study did conclude that they would need northbound left turn lanes for each entrance. So basically what Eric Mackling said is the requirement's going to be for Rome Corners to be widened out to a 3-lane section pavement-wise, but they're going to just stripe it with the turn lanes. They're not going to do a 3-lane turn section all the way down at this point. They may at the future, but right now the engineer's office doesn't think that that's necessary or desired. So they're just going to do the 2 turn lanes for now. In terms of when and how those improvements get done, that's a conversation the applicant will have with the engineer's office. Sometimes what the engineer's office will do is, instead of having the applicant do the work, if the county knows they've got a project coming online soon, to avoid double closures one right after another, and for just better coordination overall and logistics, sometimes they'll just take a contribution in lieu of from the applicant for the work, and then the county will just do that work. So I'm sure they've had those discussions and speak more to that. I'm not saying that's what they'll do here, but we have seen that method done in the past sometimes. That's all at the discretion of the county engineer's office, ultimately. Let's see, covered that. Again, I guess to sort of expand on the county engineer's role, they are the statutory engineer for the township. So when it comes to matters of traffic, drainage, grading, the township has to defer to the Delaware County engineer on those matters. We really can't, we can have opinions, but ultimately they're going to carry the day in terms of the decision-making authority on those design matters and those requirements. And Rome Corners Road is also their road, so they also obviously are gonna have final say on what happens on their road. I know it feels like our road because it's in the township, it's our community, but it is a county road. Streets and parking for within the development. All proposed streets will be public and consequently will be designed to meet the county engineer's design standards for public streets. I believe on-street parking will be permitted on the one side of these streets, which is usually the non-fire hydrant side of the street, obviously, because we don't want people blocking the hydrants when they're parking. There is a stub road to the west. Usually the county engineer requires stub roads to adjacent properties that they think could have the potential to develop in the future, so that way if it were to develop, there's an opportunity to tie roads together. That reduces access points in the future, can help with traffic flow because it's keeping it off the mains and helping it flow through the neighborhood. That said, I'm not aware of any immediate plans of that large parcel to develop. Actually, last I heard was they were thinking about putting a barn back there and someone's renting part of it to probably continue to farm it. So there's no immediate plans right now that I know of to do any kind of development back there. But planning means sometimes building stub roads to nowhere. So that's just how it goes. There are 2 cluster mailbox areas proposed for the plan. This was a reduction from the preliminary plan. I imagine that was based on feedback from the United States Postal Service regarding where they want those and how many they want. For any Seinfeld fans out there, as you know, you don't get to argue with the Postal Service. You do whatever they tell you when they tell you to do it, and there's no getting out of it. So because of that, I have not really focused a lot of the review time on the cluster mailboxes because I know the post office is just going to make them do whatever the post office wants them to do. Road signage and striping plans have been included in the plan materials. Again, I would consider those more illustrative just for you to understand that those things have been looked at. The engineer's office ultimately reviews and approves all the road signage plans, so you don't need to worry about diving too deep into that. Obviously, if you have any questions or comments, feel free, but the engineer's office will look at in conjunction with the township fire marshal to make sure that that signage is what it needs to be safe. Utilities, there were letters from all the utility providers in the submission. As I noted in the review and as I communicated to the applicant, the letters from the natural gas providers were dated. They were from the original rezoning. I've asked them to update the letters. I'm sure they've contacted them, but they can't force someone to send them a letter. I have no reason to believe they can't get natural gas service out here from one or both of the providers, but we still would like to see the letters as part of the package, just for that assurance that there's no issues. I've already talked about how sewer is going to be extended to this plan. It's going to come up 71, and then it's going to cut eastward through the Hale property and connect in through the west side of the development. That's how they're tying it in. And then during the rezoning, I believe representatives from the Hales came and said that they were willing to work with the developer. And I imagine those agreements and MOUs are still in effect and are valid because I can't imagine they would spend the kind of time and money that they have in starting to build the sewer line if they did not feel like they couldn't get the sewer extended eastward through those properties. So, and as I always say with utilities, it's sort of a self-regulating issue. If they don't get the utilities, the development's not happening. So they'll have to get it figured out and get it done one way or the other. Stormwater, again, the engineer's office is looking at all of that. I know with, in southern Delaware County, or really anywhere in Delaware County, drainage is always a concern with the soils, especially when you get the heavy kind of rain that we got this past Saturday. The engineer's office has looked at that, and you can tell that they've taken it pretty seriously because there's 3 pretty significantly sized stormwater ponds on the western end of this development that's going to service the stormwater needs for this area post-development, should this plan be approved. Open space and landscaping. I've already talked about the telecommunication tower not being in the open space. In addition to the perimeter open space that you can see in the plan, there are also 5 sort of parklets. Each one of them sort of has a unique theme and offering. I'm not going to go through the details of each one in depth, but like the main one in the southeast, sort of at the entrance's terminus, is sort of like a gateway kind of parklet where you're going to have, there's going to be a sign and a pavilion and sort of a community gathering space, more of a traditional style park. The one to the southwest is obviously a lot more wooded, and you're going to have the storm pond there. There'll be sort of nature trails there. The one to the northeast is very wooded, and there's going to be a looping trail system there and possibly like a bird viewing area or something that people can enjoy in the nature. And then a couple of the other open spaces, I believe one of them sort of an arboretum sort of theme, one of them sort of a natural vegetation theme, the one in the north. And then I think there is one that's sort of more just sort of grass, open space that's not maybe as heavily programmed as some of the other ones are. But it's a nice variety of offering of open space for the residents who will live within this plan. And all those open spaces are owned and maintained by the homeowners association. They're not costs that the township takes on as part of its parks program. Perimeter buffer plantings have been provided in conjunction with existing vegetation that's going to remain on the site. The applicant is allowed to use existing vegetation in lieu of providing new plantings because it doesn't make sense to make them knock down healthy trees to plant new trees. And we're all about trying to maintain those existing conditions in that natural vegetation state when we can. So they've provided you with the tree survey that shows which trees are coming out, which trees are staying. I've reviewed that in conjunction with the planting plan. And while you may see the math on some of those linear footages don't line up with the code requirement, in those areas, they're claiming the existing vegetation in lieu of having to provide some of those trees that they're otherwise would be required to provide. They are proposing street trees and throughout the plan. I'll note that the species they list don't, if you were to compare it against the 2020 code, don't all comply. It appears they used the species list from the current plan or the one we were working on. That's actually the preferred list, so that's actually an instance where even though it may not technically comply with the 2020 code, I think we can say it complies big picture because it complies with the 26 plan, and we very much prefer the 2026 species list because it's the updated street tree species list that the commission worked on the last couple of years as part of the omnibus amendment, and that list was developed by our Parks Committee, and there's some really good, smart people who know a lot about trees on that Parks Committee who made sure that the species we're requiring fit the street widths that they're going to be planted in. Because I'm sure we've all gone down streets and see all the sidewalks that are buckling from street trees species that should have never been planted where they were. So we're hoping with this new list in the future, in 30, 40 years, we won't see that problem like we are in some of the neighborhoods currently. A substantial number of trees is being saved by the plan. A lot are coming out. Don't get me wrong. But I believe they're saving approximately 63% of the tree stock on the plan. Now, a lot of the trees that are being preserved are the ones that are in the thicker areas over here to the west. A lot of the ones that are being removed are the ones along Rome Corners as part of probably like the expanded right-of-way. Also, obviously, you're going to have some come out for the roads and the stormwater ponds that have to go in. The other ones that are coming out tend to be sort of like those borderline trees that sort of demarcated the different fields that are sort of just in a line. So, but the areas with like dense trees, especially in the northwest quadrant of the plan, are largely remaining unless they were of poor quality, like the ash trees and stuff that's dead and dying. Pedestrian connectivity, there's sidewalks throughout the plan. We've got a 15-foot wide pedestrian easement along the frontage of Rome Corners Road. That way, if the township ever, if a path network does ever work up its way, we have the rights to go in and build and extend it to service this plan. I've already talked about the asphalt trail systems that go throughout the parklets, and I'm sure the applicant can expand upon those if you wish. All the amenities they are proposing in the open space are appropriate and permitted uses of the open space. Signage, I mentioned there's going to be a sign in sort of that central park area. Each of the entrances are also going to be flanked with very nice sort of corner treatment brick structures that will have signage, one at each entrance. Somewhat similar, I would say, maybe to what we've seen out actually in Mirasol. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same in terms of design, but same sort of theory, I think, in terms of treatment as what you can see out there at the Mirasol development in terms of the signage and the brick. Mr. Romanelli always builds very nice plan entrances, so I have no concerns about that. I also have no concerns because I reviewed it and the signage is compliant, the heights are compliant, the lighting is compliant, all that stuff is good. I have a note in here about temporary signs. That's more for the applicant, just so they can understand how we're going to view and treat temporary signs on this site. There are no street lights proposed for this development. Each dwelling will have a standard coach light. You've probably seen that in a lot of our neighborhoods where they have the little lamp sort of in the front yard. I know, and they're all over Highland Lakes. Article 21 lighting standards is technically not applicable per the 2020 code. However, the applicant has codified some of those lighting standards to, again, help protect against lighting pollution in the neighborhood. In terms of architecture, they have provided typical designs and elevations for the homes and the amenities they're going to build in this. We always try to make sure we make it very clear on the record with the homes that because we are not an architectural review board and our zoning code doesn't have architectural standards, that these are merely illustrative of their design intent. They could modify the elevations of these homes. But I think we're all pretty familiar with the types and style homes that Romanelli tends to build in these neighborhoods. Some of the neighborhoods we have currently under construction are Romanelli neighborhoods, the Grove, Reserve at Memoir. So if you go into either of those, you can sort of see what they're building in those. And I would say what they're planning here is, big picture, very similar to look and feel that you would see in those neighborhoods. The plan will be governed by a master homeowners association, which will control and regulate the overall development. There'll also be a sub-association for the patio homes that I think is going to be more of a targeted customer base for them and sort of market as the villas at Mira Luna due to the limited maintenance-free living component that's going to be offered with that particular unit type. I already sort of referenced the prior divergences. In addition to the one pertaining to the zoning code, there was also a divergence related to the limiting of tree clearing. Also one related to allowing that lot to be in what would otherwise be the open space buffer down there in the southeast. There is one new divergence they're requesting. It's just to allow them to construct, believe it or not, we're getting down into this nitty-gritty, window wells. They're requesting to reduce and modify the window well requirement that was in the 2020 code to allow window wells to encroach up to 4 feet into the side yard setback, so long as they're not an opposing window well on adjacent property within 3 feet. They've run into this issue, I believe, with the Grove was where we saw this most recently. So when they ran into that issue, they thought, aha, we probably should tighten that up and make sure we don't repeat that error or situation in this plan. So that's why they're asking for it. I don't really have concerns about it. If you're running between homes that you shouldn't be, and you fall into a window well, I sort of feel like that's on you, kind of thing. So now getting to staff commentary. I'm not going to go through the comp plan review. That was largely reviewed as part of the rezoning. In very short, what they were proposing is consistent with the comp plan that existed at the time that the rezoning came through. They would not be subject, if they came through now, they would be subject to the Hoover Watershed Overlay District, because believe it or not, a small fraction of it does cross over Rome Corners Road into this property. However, that district did not exist when they did the rezoning, hence it's not applicable to this application. I'll get to my technical review in a moment. You can see in the staff commentary, I have a few items there that I've just recommended that they take into consideration. Most of those, I think, were in the rezoning memorandum, so I can't imagine it's anything new for the applicant for them to kick around. A lot of this is just based on experience that staff's had over the years with as plans get built and developed, some of the hiccups that come up. One of those hiccups is people never seem to realize that they bought a plan that has trails in it, and that trail is running next to their house or behind their house. So we're asking, sometimes we feel like maybe if they can put up signage along where the lot, they always have the signs with all the lots, maybe putting up sign of, location of future trails so people know where some of those trailheads are going to be. We'd like to think that the sales office will communicate that to prospective buyers, and nothing against the Romanelli sales team or any other residential developer sales team, but based on the phone calls we've gotten over the years, it doesn't always happen. Or it happens and people don't remember it. But we just feel like that signage might be an extra step that they can do to try to communicate. There is going to be a trail behind your house, so please don't call zoning staff in 5 years when it's actually getting built and complain that there's a trail behind your house that's been planned for 6 years. The staff is suggesting maybe identifying which improvements will be completed prior to the issuance of any permits for any subsequent phases in the development. If nothing else, to just sort of serve as a carrot for the that ensures the developer will get some of those amenities done and put in before they move on to the next phase. Because otherwise, we don't always have triggers for that, and they tend to be sometimes the last things done within a plan occasionally. I already talked about the cluster mailboxes. I said I wasn't going to get into too much, but I always can't help but throw in this recommendation of lights, waste receptacles, a bench, designated parking space if possible, next to those cluster box areas, just to make them a little bit more functional and easier to access for people. But again, since it's in the road right away, that can be sometimes a little bit easier said than done. And then also, any of that infrastructure that gets put in, the homeowners association has to maintain. They've got to empty the trash can. So I can understand some of the logistical concerns and why those things aren't always ultimately offered. The other item I had in terms of suggestion, was talking about what was going to happen with the remnant strip of land. So if you can see in the northern end along Rome Corners, you can see sort of like a tooth section that's not part of the plan. In the middle of sort of that tooth section, there's a small strip of land with a driveway on it that actually was part of this tract, but it's not part of the rezone. It's going to be a remnant sort of strip of land. That remnant strip has the driveway that 4 homes access. So the comment in the memo was, we need the plan to sort of tell us how we're going to deal with that. And the revisions, they did speak to it, and Mr. Fisher and I were even before the meeting sort of talking about logistically and procedurally the details of the exact best way to get that done. So what we'll probably do is continue to have those conversations, and then also I know regional planning would be involved with that because it's a subdivision activity, and Scott Sanders would probably have good insight too of how he thinks the best way to go about that's to get that done. That's in the best interest of the residents long-term, but also isn't overly burdensome on the applicant here. So I think they're going to try to avoid doing what I would call a formal common access driveway, often called a CAD, because there's all sorts of strings that come with that. But they could do what maybe is like a shared driveway agreement condition. So that's probably something more that I'll end up dealing with after, if this plan were to be approved after the fact, but it's good to start those conversations now. So when we do get to that point, or should we get to that point, we don't have to spend a lot of time figuring it out. We've already sort of determined how it's all going to work. Just because this is a new process, I put a lot of reminders in the memorandum. I'm going to spare us the time of reading all of those. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, or if the public wants to know more about what's in there, I'm happy to go through it. But for the sake of brevity, I'm already at almost 35 minutes, so I'm not going to read through all of those. And then just to wrap things up in the memo, should the request for final development plan approval be granted, the applicant will be required to obtain final engineering approval and appropriate permits prior to construction. And should the plan be approved, any future revisions would be subject to section 2710 of the zoning resolution as it may be amended. That concludes the memorandum. I am going to just jump into the comments, the tech review comments real quick. Again, I'm going to skip over what I would consider very small detail, ticky-tacky comments where we're talking about extraneous comments. No one wants to hear about all that. I'm just going to talk about what I would consider sort of the more significant comments, at least in my opinion, that staff has. But again, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything in the materials. One of the comments was just revising the text to state that there's no other primary conservation areas in the plan other than the wetlands that they've already disclosed to us. I don't think there are. It's a flat site, not really a lot of steep slopes going on here or anything else, but I'd just like to see that in black and white in the text so no one can ask the question of, well, how do you know it's not in there? Well, because they told us. The next comment was revising the development text to talk about that lot transfer that I just went through, so I don't need to expand upon that any further in this presentation. The next comment was the development text needing to be revised to speak to what regulations, again, will apply to that remnant lot down there in the southeast. They already have they have an exhibit with the setbacks on it, which is great. That's super helpful. Where we'll run into with staff in terms of administration headaches is how do we treat decks, sheds, pools? They do have verbiage in the text that says that lot is part of the homeowners association. I asked Mr. Fisher before the meeting if they can just make it slightly stronger and clearer that all the rules applicable to all of those improvements specified in the text also apply to that lot. And then that will bridge that all together cleanly and we'll know exactly where to look. Believe it or not, I think that wraps up the significant comments. Everything else in there, I would say, is really what I would just call polishing of the plan. I guess I'll leave the only other comment I had out there, and I've communicated this to them, is it may be of the benefit of both the applicant and the potential future residents of this plan for the applicant to put a statement in the development text that reserves the right for the residents of that plan to utilize the current zoning resolution in effect in instances where it's more advantageous for them. So as several of you know, because we did the omnibus amendment, like, here's an example. Now, on these lots, if they wanted to put up an accessory building that's smaller than 200 square feet, they're not going to require a zoning permit under the current code. That provision doesn't exist in the 2020 iteration of the code. So technically speaking, someone could make the argument of, well, they adopted this version of the code as their code, so they still are required to have a permit. I don't think that's fair. That's probably not how I would choose to administrate it, but to make life easier on me and to make it just more defensible and clear for everyone, I think a statement to that effect that those residents shouldn't lose those rights that are otherwise would be offered to all the other residents in the community just because this plan was approved under an older iteration of the zoning code. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. Happy to answer any questions or comments, but I'm sure you're eager to hear from the applicant and the public. So turn the floor back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Yeah, it's the applicant's time to respond to Joe, or if you want to expand on this.
Did Mr. Adler have a question?
I had a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify.
Yes, sir.
The application of the, I'll call it the resolution that's out there and the fix to say you can use more of a contemporary resolution, is the resolution applicable to the development versus the developer and getting their application in, in the timeframe for this project? So if I lived in the jurisdiction, we built a house and we lived in the jurisdiction 5
Sure.
years from now, am I going back and saying, oh, I'll use the current or I'll use the 2020 resolution? Is that my option? Is that what we're saying?
I wouldn't say you necessarily have the option. My guess is in most instances, the current code's going to be more advantageous for the residents. So I think it's only fair for them to get to operate under
Yeah,
the current code.
I didn't know if it was more of an applicant,
No, I'd say that's more.
Versus, the land and.
I think it's more advantageous for the future residents of the plan,
Okay.
not necessarily the applicant.
And then just a couple other questions. And I know the divergence number 3, facts have changed. We're going to move a house over there. We were going to retain a house, and then it was going to be a lot, and then it's going to be a movement of a house. Do we need to update or modify divergence number 3 for that slight change of facts? I don't see an issue with it.
Sure,
I'm just
no,
saying,
no, I don't think that's necessary. The divergence allows the lot to be located
yeah,
within that.
it's a
open space.
setback issue,
Yeah,
right?
it-
Right.
Yeah, it allows that lot within that setback, so no, I don't
Okay.
think so.
By the way, we did modify that divergence number 3.
Oh, did you,
Don't
to
move the
speak to
house.
that fact?
Well, that's what I'm saying, for the committee. And for
Yeah,
the
I guess I
chairman-
viewed it
The chairman
as-
might be, we ought to think about whether we need to take actions or some type of resolution.
They
relative
did
to that.
speak to that in the materials. I didn't feel like they necessarily need to.
Gotcha.
I mean, they can modify it on the record if they want to. I didn't feel like it's necessary, because to me, the non-compliance was having a home lot in the 175 or 170-foot buffer requirement.
Right.
The divergence that they have granted from 23 allows for that condition. What they're proposing here doesn't change that condition. It's still a lot in the open space. Whether it was the current house there or an existing house being moved there, to me,
It's a
doesn't
setback
change.
issue, so,
Yeah,
right, right.
correct.
And then my final comment for you, Joe, would be and I think you addressed it by saying they're going to think in terms of if it's more advantageous to use the current zoning, ordinance versus the prior zoning ordinance. I think of the street trees, right? And we're saying it'd be better to use the current one in that instance. And so I think that probably solves the issue if they incorporate that. Because my question was, do you need another divergence relative to that, or is it just too minor to?
Yeah, I mean,
Because again, we're applying all of the 2020, rule set, and I want to make sure that, if we need to take actions relative to the rule set, that we take appropriate action.
yeah, I don't know if you legally would have to make that a 5th divergence. I mean, if you feel if the commission's fine with that, doing it that way, and they just feel more comfortable doing it as a divergence just to codify it, I have no issues with it either, though.
Thank you for your.
So what do you want a divergence for? You basically want to say that the owners
Well-
of these lots will be, like, will fall
Yeah,
under the
no,
current
I
zoning
was,
code?
I was addressing the street trees that, you know, part of the process is that we could use the current resolution for the type of species for the street trees, right? Versus the 2020 resolution. And my
Yeah.
question was whether that required a divergence, right? I think what I heard Joe say earlier is that if it's incorporated in the plan for application of resolution that's most advantageous to whether it's homeowners or the current developer, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I think I think if they added that statement.
Yeah,
we
if they
probably
added
would-
that, I don't
think
see
it'd
any
be
point
fine.
of a divergence, that's all.
Because
So-
what would happen ultimately is they could go back and change the plans and put all the street tree species from the 2020
know.
version in there for sake of compliance. And then the day after it gets approved, come back to me and say, okay, Joe, we want to change all the street tree species to the current code. And I would just administratively approve it because why wouldn't I? Because it's compliant. So, yeah, it just seems senseless to have to go through that exercise. So I think that statement that you're talking about would be sufficient.
I have one question for you,
Mhm.
Joe. In your technical review, under your development review section number 3O, could you speak a little bit more about the retaining walls comment that you have
Oh,
here, please?
yeah. There's just a section of the code that talks about retaining walls, and I just asked them to, just like they did for some of those other articles, just incorporate.
Elaborate a
Sort
little
of,
bit
just
more.
sort of the general verbiage that they did for some of those other articles that they agree to comply with and understand that those rules will apply. Again, if they put that statement in there about the current code, they could also take advantage of that. So they got most of the sections, they just missed the 2004 section. Or at least I didn't see it. If it's in there and I missed it, I'm sure they'll let me know.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone of the public that wants to speak?
Well, the, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think that,
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. With these questions here from the commission, I'm confused, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Hi, David Fisher with Kephart Fisher, here on behalf of the applicant. We've got our entire development team here. We got Jim Olin from Raminelli and UCN, Gary Smith, our land planner with G2 Design, and Kyle Shreves with EMH&T with the engineering. So everyone that had anything to do with this final application is sitting here at the table tonight. So available to answer questions you may have on any aspects of this. Thanks for allowing us to present tonight on this. As always, Mr. Schaefer's done a phenomenal job of detailing everything that needs to be taken care of, and we very much appreciate that. We always enjoy working with each other. I do understand that about 2/3 of the commission is new, and many of you weren't here at the time that this matter was taken through the zoning process and the preliminary development plan process. So what I want to say to you is that keeping in mind that that activity a few years ago was the official zoning and preliminary development plan. And as you heard Joe say a few minutes ago, that everything we're doing now is in substantial compliance with that plan. We are happy to go into as much detail as you would like to about this plan. It's a very comprehensive plan. There's a lot of detail. Happy to answer questions. I don't want to spend 2 hours going through all the details, but I'm happy to do that if you'd like to do that. Our whole development team is here. We're happy to do that with you tonight. But generally, we have reviewed Mr. Schaefer's technical review and his memorandum and their updates, and we have no dispute or disagreement with anything that he has in there, and we would agree to make all the modifications and changes and additions that he has asked for. So once again, happy to go into a lot of detail. I think he's touched on this, a lot of it already. If you want to have more detail, because some of you are new, I do know you've had your books for a while. I apologize. It's always this drill of, uh-oh, here's another 50 pages you didn't have before that we delivered, and I do apologize. It's like sausage making. It just occurs. So I apologize for that. But I just want to share with you that we're in full agreement. We think we have a compliant final development plan. We like Mr. Schaefer's comments. We will incorporate them in our revised documents going forward. And with that, unless anybody else on our team has anything to add, we'd open it back up to you. If you want us to give you more detail, we will. Is that fair?
Sounds good. We'll first go over to public comments. As a reminder, all public comments, including questions, are to be directed only to the commission. The applicant will be provided an opportunity to respond following the closing of the public comments period, followed by the commission members. Anyone from the public that wants to address the project?
Possibly.
Well,
I'm debating on if this is the right form, that's all.
if you want to, you just come up there at
Yeah.
the microphone.
So, good evening, I'm Chris Bishop. And like I said, I don't know if this is the form, so Joe, maybe I could ask for your guidance if this is not. Maybe this is just a question for the applicants. Concerns about, really, our concerns as a contiguous homeowner are about waterways. And so we actually live on the southwest corner of this property. And when we were reviewing some of the online docs, there was one of the drawings, and again, I may have missed one of these meetings, so I apologize. Had maybe a retention pond, maybe where the last three red lots are. And this one obviously now is to the north, so I'm just curious, from a water runoff sort of passage, I guess my, again, comment, part comment, part statement, is that is a concern of ours. So, and I can take that offline and ask the applicants for a better description or an explanation, understand it better, or take a note on public record. That's a concern of ours. It's something, you know, may change in the development of this retention pond.
Is it Chris?
Yes,
Chris, what's your address?
6821.
Thank you. I think that's a fair question, and I think we should give the applicant a chance to respond.
So you said you live on the southwest corner
Yeah.
there? Actually, so that particular area, the tributary area, the water that used to come towards you in that property, we actually are capturing a lot of that now and redirecting it to the basins to the north, treating it there and detaining it and actually releasing it to an existing stream, even to the north of that. So I think the version that you saw previously was an early version.
It's got a red line.
Yeah, and so we've actually, taken that into consideration through the process. Are actually capturing a lot of the water that's coming that way.
So essentially, the runoff that maybe used to come down, or maybe the new street's going to be,
Mhm.
is going to divert north versus south, where it currently is.
Yep.
Okay. So that's already been done?
It's in the design.
Oh, it's in the design,
It's
yeah,
in the
okay.
final engineering design.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And those red lots there, they actually have a storm sewer system to capture flows.
Okay.
In large events that may like run over land, those will captures that and sends it to the basin as well.
Good.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Is there anyone else of the public that wants to speak? Yeah, sure. You can come up. Sorry. Yeah, I know. Can you, please for the record, state your name and address?
Concern about traffic.
Okay.
Going to a three-lane road and description. No, you haven't talked about turn lanes into development. The question is, how does this impact right turn, or if you're coming south from the corners, turning into the house, existing housing, but roadways. The reason I'm concerned about this is where their access roads will go, it's like right across the house.
Right. Anyone want to address it?
Yeah, so those, the improvements when they go to a left turn lane, and actually, I think this project is actually going, Joe spoke to it as well, but is actually going to be in combination with a larger Delaware County engineering project, with regards to the roundabout. And starting at the south end, the project's actually going to, the two projects combined will actually create a 3-lane section. And when they create that 3-lane section, it basically creates an area where when you're turning left into it, coming southbound, you have an area to stop and wait.
Like basically middle lane.
Exactly.
People would be,
Yep.
question is, like, allowed to.
Yeah, sure.
Retention ponds, never seen any depth on geologists, hydrologists. And looking at the amount of runoff, to speak to questions that were spoken before, right now you have 30 acres of field captures some rain soaks in and everything. How about this paved roof area for houses, will have a lot more runoff into the stormwater system that they're designing, going to the retention ponds. But volumetrically, how much water would you be able to hold? Because just being, what heck, I've played around with rain gauge for years here and looking at the storms and like, some years you have more rain events than less. 2 years ago, we had like 12 days over an inch and a quarter of rain in one 24-hour period. Last year, we only had 4. This year, so far, we've had 5 events that are over an inch. And just, it doesn't affect us at all, but the people that are to the south or to the west, it will, because I know when they get a heavy rain event, the creek is quite wild for them. So just wondering, like I said, just doing perimeter around the lakes going, well, if you had this amount of rain, not taking into account for the depth, because I don't know which.
With regards to the depths, most of those are, from a storage perspective, are, 4 to 5 feet of depth of storage, or open, available space for it. The basins, they do follow the Delaware County standards and regulations. So we're basically, to your point, you are correct, pavement surfaces create more water.
It's hard to have it soaking with concrete.
Yep. So what the standards do with in Delaware County is they, basically what they create is a peak shaving situation. So as you were saying, the downstreams, they get basically inundated, right? These will capture the water, hold them, and release a slower rate over a longer period of time. So it's basically, instead of getting the rainfall and, say, a real quick burst, you'll see that water be released over the next 24 to 48 hours.
You would have enough,
And then volume will,
you wouldn't overtop or anything.
right.
Get away from it.
Yeah, and actually, the Delaware Engineers Office, they require us to provide enough volume to handle a 100-year event. So, and that's a very large event. I mean,
All those stormwater standards are reviewed by the Delaware County Engineers
Right.
Office.
And we're actually, in our last review, we've had very little comments with regards to stormwater management on this, being we're doing a great job. But we're following, we're good. So, this was I think, it'll be taken care of, to ease your concerns.
You-
Anyone else that wants to speak? Okay, then I'll be closing public comments. You guys kind of answered. If you want to expand on any of these things.
The one thing I wanted to add was, to Mr. Adler's comment earlier in the repartee with Mr. Schaefer, we would like to add, we'll add this divergence that the most advantageous code will apply for things like trees and sheds and that kind of stuff. That's an easy divergence, so we'd add that as divergent number 5.
Clear?
I agree, absolutely.
Well, then it's time for discussion of the commission. If anyone has questions for the applicants.
Well, I have a couple questions. One, I am one of the new guys on the block, so thank you for, putting up with any questions, and I appreciate the education of the development process, so just wanted to caveat that right up front. And looking at the development, it looks like a great development. You guys have given a lot of thought process in it, and I think Romanelli's done a great job in, Genoa Township with all the developments. And obviously, great team. My question was, I think one of the hallmarks of Delaware County, because I've lived here for 25, 30 years now, and is, it's dedication to, the landscape, to resources, to wildlife, right? So this is just a question, again, for my information, and it may be something as you approach the project, just to educate me. How do you approach process-wise, the company approach process-wise, as you go into your development and start doing your work to address wildlife habitat, endangered species issues, things of that nature? Is that a function of expertise within RH? Is it a function of expertise of others? Because, it is a very natural state, this whole tract of land. So that's just an education of how you approach it in your process.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really a variety of consultants. Sometimes it's us up front on the planning end. It's tree removal specialists and arborists. It's sometimes environmental studies, those kind of things that kind of make you study, different aspects of the development, wetlands and species and those kind of things. And then you also have, a variety of restrictions that are in place in terms of kind of when you can cut trees down to, avoid kind of the bat mating season. So there's a lot of things already in place, through the EPA and ODNR that kind of dictate what you can and can't do. So it's really a variety of those things that kind of informs the approach overall to, how you go about developing a piece of property and doing it in, the most sensitive way possible.
So with respect to the Barra Luna project, those are the aspects that you'll be considering?
Yeah, and some of them already have. They're out there kind of on the property already, kind of looking at different things. And so we have to kind of incorporate all of those things into the development. And same thing with stormwater pollution, all of those things, you have to be pretty diligent about it in a construction site just to make sure that we're not having any, runoff pollution, make sure that, in terms of cutting down trees that, we're not cutting down an eagle's nest or cutting down during the bat mating season. There are a lot of things that kind of go into that.
Okay, that's great. And then a kind of related question, because you talked about the water issue. I think water has come up a couple times in our conversations here. And I think you're kind of in that, if I read correctly, the Alum Creek watershed, right?
Yep.
I know Joe mentioned the Hoover, and we touch on the Hoover, which doesn't apply, but the Alum Creek watershed, because everything flows towards Alum Creek. And,
Yep.
and again, that was another one of the, just educating me as a committee member of your approach and process relative to that. And I think looking at a lot of the materials, you do have different, Army Corps, you've got the EPA to deal with, and you got a ton of compliance there.
There's a whole host of folks
Yeah,
there to make sure that we do things right.
Is that an internal thing? Like, I've got expertise within R&H that, is assuring that I'm going to comply with all these things?
Yeah, well, at this point, any contractor that's worth their salt, and
Yep.
certainly all of the contractors that Romanelli and Hughes, they have longstanding relationships with contractors going back 40 years. All of those folks are familiar with EPA requirements, kind of what you can and can't do, what you have to and don't have to have a permit for, inspections, all of those things. And it really all revolves around kind of stormwater quality, just making sure, a lot of, Kyle spends probably a fair bit of his time going through stormwater pollution prevention plans. Where are we going to have silt fence? Where are we going to have inlet protection? Those kind of things. And so it really kind of starts with the engineering and the permitting process, through the EPA and the Army Corps. And then, during construction, there's inspections, that pop up on site just to make sure that all of those things that we guaranteed would be in place are in place to make sure that we're not getting, runoff pollution into the Alum Creek watershed.
Perfect. That's an education for me, so
Yeah.
thank you for
Sure.
moderating that. I had a couple other specific questions, and again, this is just based on me looking at drawings and stuff. I think, looking at this drawing here, and looking at the existing pond, and looking at, I think it's like 89 and 90, they just look really close to that. I mean, again, I'm looking at drawings, so it may not be per scale, but look really close to that pond. And so my question really is, is there a buffer that's gonna separate the lot from that pond? I know there was some buffers for the watershed, and it looked like they were on the other side, or the side, and maybe the east side and the south side. I didn't know how close we are to lots, and I'm just thinking in terms of, again, it's buyer beware a little bit, but, are we gonna have any issues relative to the 100-year events with that pond and encroachment on any of the lots? So
That's a great question. And the easy answer to that is, so that pond is an existing pond, but it is not going to be utilized at all for stormwater treatment.
That's right.
It's on kind of the high side of the development.
I assume it's a spring fed or something.
Not sure. I don't know, Kyle, if you can answer that, but, it's an old farm pond. It's been there for a long time. There's some wetlands surrounding it. So we just thought it best to kind of incorporate it in the development and not touch it. So there won't actually be any like a pond stormwater storage.
Right.
In
But-
that pond.
But you're doing some buffering around it,
Yeah, I mean, there
Right.
is some separation between that pond and the lots.
Okay, I didn't know how
Um,
much. That's the only question I had. I just looked at the picture,
Yeah,
and it looked close.
It's
that's all.
it's probably 10 or 15 feet.
Okay.
It's a little bit different than a stormwater pond because, we've got
Yep.
access easements and everything that we have to provide around the stormwater pond. This one not serving any stormwater function. The only thing that we have to do is just make sure that we pick up any runoff that might come out of that pond and kind of divert it back into.
So will you put tile in or something to?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Address that.
all of those lots will likely have stormwater, storm sewers in the backyard with catch basins.
Oh, okay.
So any
Like
water.
French drains or something?
No, it'll actually be storm sewer and
Oh,
a-
okay.
and a catch
Okay.
basin.
Oh, yeah,
An
okay.
actual catch basin.
All
So
right,
any
no, that makes
water
sense.
that might come out of that pond, if there's just a massive stormwater event, will just, it won't go into the homes. It'll go down into the ditch and into the storm sewer system and just get transported to the west.
That's great. And then my last question I had was, and it is just a comment, because I live in the Lakes area, and you got the WSU tower there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, and it's a big tower. I've seen it for all my life in Columbus, because I've lived over in that area for a long time. But the one thing that's nice about that tower is that it's almost like a woods around it. I mean, with the exception, it's a very tall tower. It's not like the telecommunications tower that is likely in the lot that you guys have, which is not probably nearly the height. Any thoughts to having more screening or blocking? If I was in any of the lots, like 97 to 101 or something, and, it's an aesthetic issue, and whether, in looking at the landscape plan, I didn't really note much additional activity there, and just,
Well, one of the hallmarks of kind of a Romanelli and Hughes community is they like to go in and start construction and then kind of assess.
Okay.
What they're going to have, and it is not uncommon at all for Vince or Jim to go out to a site and say, we need to provide some more landscaping here. and put some more trees in. So I think that's something that ultimately that will be kind of contemplated, especially as they start to build that section, see where that lot is, kind of get an idea of really what the view of that tower looks like. I would expect that we might be coming back in and applying some more landscaping.
Perfect, perfect. It was just an observation more than anything else.
Yeah.
Those are my questions or comments. Thank you for the education, guys,
Sure,
by the way.
sure.
Anyone else?
I have just one. So looking at the water spaces, I live in a community that has several of them, and they're kind of categorized in a couple of different ways. Some that are like wetlands or natural spaces, and others that actually have fountains, et cetera, to move the water. And the biggest differentiation there from a homeowner's perspective, especially if you're backing up or facing some of these, is the buildup over the course of the summer that can happen. Could you talk a little bit about, and living in that type of a community, it could be an eyesore, frankly, and a pest problem, right? Could you talk a little bit about what the plans are with respect to that? And I'm sorry if I missed that somewhere in the materials. I'm relatively
No, that's
new to this
fine.
group
I
as
mean, in
well.
general, stormwater ponds that are intended to be wet, usually we at least have a bubbler in them.
Okay.
That way, they don't get stagnant water, algae, you know, the kind of stuff that nobody wants to see, kind of a green swamp in
And the
their
bugs.
beautiful
Yeah.
community, right?
Yes.
So the wetlands, obviously, we can't touch. We're not
That's the one
disturbing those.
existing that you were talking about?
Well, the existing pond has some wetlands around it.
Okay,
But yeah, I would imagine that that pond may be treated as well. That's something that we'll have to take a look at. But generally, when there's a pond that retains water on the site, we always want to have some sort of aeration in it to just make sure that water continues to move and doesn't stay stagnant.
Would that be-
I have one thing, when we have an opportunity and we have enough depth in the ponds, we'll put fountain. It's an amenity for us,
Mhm.
just as, so I think it's an important feature.
Well, it makes it so much more enjoyable for the residents. And if it's not, then would that become an ownership issue of the HOA if there weren't water movements, that they would have to contemplate treating the pond?
There will be some sort of device in there that will promote the water movement.
Okay.
But, I mean, eventually, yes, I mean, regardless of what happens there, the homeowners association is ultimately going to be responsible for
Maintenance
all
of
of
it,
that
yeah.
common area. So if
Okay.
one of the aerators dies,
Mhm.
you know, it will be the homeowners association ultimately that would, you know, replace that. And
Okay.
they'll develop a reserve fund for those kind of things.
Thank
But
you.
remember, that's a number of years down the road because Romeo and Hughes will control and be the master developer within the homeowners association
Mm.
until essentially all the lots are sold.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you.
I do have a couple questions, I guess out of curiosity perhaps, but also I think for clarity with regard to the development text. And I appreciate the fact that you've amended the text with regard to divergence 3. Why was the existing home demolished? And, you know, while I understand the argument that, hey, we're leaving it there and if we demolish it, we don't need the divergence, I understand the irony of that. Can I just get a little more history behind that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So during the zoning process, we were attempting to save that house. And so Vince actually personally went through that house multiple times. And he's like, Jim, I think we can save it. I said, great, we're gonna try to save it. And after we did a full assessment, we closed all the property and owned everything, we walked through and there were multiple feet of water in the basement. So it would have been best for us to be able to save that house and redo it, but at the end, from a financial standpoint, it absolutely made no sense. So we wanted to save it.
Can you discuss again, I appreciate the effort to relocate the existing home. Why? Why go through that effort?
The existing home that's there now, it's right where our new entrance is, where our entrance is
Yep.
gonna be. It's a beautiful little ranch. We're actually redesigning it. We're redoing the outside and updating it, and then moving the house to the new location.
So is that a financial decision that it seems to make sense with the previous plan and that we can sort of get more out of that by relocating it than that exceeds the cost of actually relocating it?
I mean, I guess I want to make sure I understand your question. Meaning, is
Understood. Yeah, I think I was just looking for clarity, and the reason being is I'm reading the divergence text from before, and it says, "The divergence is justified to permit an existing 50-plus-year-old home to remain on the property and be renovated and sold to a third party. Preserving this historic home along or situated on Rome Corners Road will advance the public interest by preserving an historical home asset or home and assist in the orderly development of lands within the township." So I agree with you, and I appreciate that, and actually that was going to be one of my questions, because my understanding of the house that is going to be relocated was built in 1999. I think the original one that has been demolished was 1932. So they're a different genre, and different time period. So I was wondering, the ranch does feature a vinyl siding, while the original home features a brick siding. And so can you explain a little bit more about the exterior improvements to the house that's going to be relocated?
Sure. I think Joe stopped in and gave samples, we can give those to you as well. We've added stone on the front of the house, so that's battled it a little bit. As far as siding goes, I'm not sure if I'd have to check depending on whether or not we're gonna replace all of the siding on the vinyl and go with hardwood plank is typically what we do. My guess is that's what we have on our plans, but I can check on it for you.
And then the follow-up question, thank you for those answers. Follow-up questions, what is the genesis for the required divergence from the previous plan? So the preliminary development plan, we did not have divergence 4, which talked about the sort of basement windows. What has caused that requirement for a divergence now?
That's a historic, in other words, a couple of years have passed
Yeah.
since our original zoning and preliminary development plan. And we've realized that on smaller lots, sometimes with these egress windows, you need to offset them. You need to come into the setback zone.
Okay.
And that's really what it applies to. But to Mr. Schaefer's point earlier, you have to have offset window wells, so mowers and people and fire and police can get between dwelling units without falling down the window well.
Right, sure.
That's the purpose for it.
So the homes aren't any closer than they were before? Great, thank you. Couple more questions, if you don't mind. What is the intent with the termination, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing this right, Columbria Street? So I notice here that all these streets are interior to the property, however, this one terminates at the site boundary. Can you explain why that is designed that way rather than a traditional cul-de-sac?
I mean, yeah, in general, the county makes us provide stubs to undeveloped adjacent property in the off chance that it will develop and neighborhoods could connect up. And so ultimately, that's just us kind of responding to what the county requires.
By the way, we know the owner of that property.
That was my next question.
We know that he's not gonna develop it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the county engineer's mind that he always wants interconnectivity.
Great.
Whenever possible.
And I think they'll make you do a temporary turnaround at the end of it.
We'll have the hammerhead or something.
There's a hammerhead, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I saw one. So yeah, there'll be some sort of turnaround, but yeah, that's very common of the engineer's office to require that.
He will not yield on that. We tried.
Yet. Great, and my last question, I think this is actually more for Joe. What are the implications of the Hoover Reservoir Overlay District on these parcels? So the top and the bottom parcel are still indicated as part of the overlay district. So now that we have one sort of site, is the whole site now within the overlay district, or has that been removed because this is a planned residential district?
It would have been if we hadn't had that divergence to operate under the 2020 code.
That's what I thought.
It's in, with the overlay, it was in for a penny, in for a pound. If you were an inch over, the whole site was completely in. But yeah, this one, because of the divergence, and one of the reasons we granted that divergence is because that overlay was in the works when this plan was being worked on, and we knew that was a possibility. And it would have significantly impacted the development, which didn't seem terribly fair, to be honest. So the township agreed that that was a fair conclusion to reach, was to do that divergence for that purpose.
That's what I figured. I guess my last would be a comment. So thank you very much for taking the effort to relocate the existing home as part of the original plan to save some of the historic fabric. there at that location rather than just leaving it as open space. I understand it'll be part of the development, help with the character along Rome Corners Road, and the development itself is relatively pushed back from Rome Corners Road, so I think it still maintains some of the more rural residential district appropriate to that neighborhood, so thank you.
I wanna go back to Mr. Adler's first question about open space, and about maintaining wildlife and current stature of the property. This has been zoned with conservation development standards, which means a lot of open space has been preserved in its natural state throughout this project and around this project. And Joe, I'm just interested, how many PRDs with conservation development standards have been implemented in the township?
Put me on the spot there. I couldn't give you a number, but I would say most of the ones we've done in the last several years, including probably the Grove and Reserve at Vimar, I think, were conservation.
It's a relative unique zoning classification that you have that we don't see in most jurisdictions.
That's true.
What's that?
I said that point is true.
And that's a lot of work that goes into that, and the result of that, Mr. Adler, is a lot of that preserved area you see for wildlife, and you heard about the birding area and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think the plans are great. I just wanted to be familiar more with the process, and I think I got good education on the process, and I think with Genoa Township, it's a big issue, you know, and that's why I think we have conservation, you know, parameters in our zoning code, is because people like to live here, and they like the natural amenities that we have in the jurisdiction, so I appreciate that.
And all of us on this team have been working with Genoa Township for a number of years, and I think some of you have pointed out the level and quality of development that you see on all the Roman Williams projects throughout the township are, I think, of the highest quality and very sensitive to not only the concerns of the township in terms of their residents. One of the beautiful things about working with the Roman Williams team is that Gary's right. If they're gonna look at something and whether this says we're gonna do it or not, they're gonna do it because their reputation's at stake. I work with a lot of builders and developers, and I can't think of one that cares more about their long-term reputation than Richmond.
I agree.
I have a question for Joe, maybe. The original divergence number 3 that was approved, did that talk about the existing building, or did that always just talk about the lots? Or was it to preserve the existing building? I mean, because I understand why we approved it, because we want to save a building, and that's why that lot it's kind of awkwardly in that open space, boundary setback. Because it was like a historical home, but now that historical home goes away, and I mean, to me, it seems more appropriate that it would be open space, but.
Yeah, the justification certainly referenced the historical nature of the home, as Mr. Teichman sort of alluded to. I guess in my opinion, there's still, even though it's maybe not as historical per se, I still think retaining one of the existing homes on the roadway and moving it and upgrading it is still probably a valid use of, and it's not changing, right, the character of the neighborhood, right? There's always been a house on that lot. So I think the divergence as originally approved, again, was for the lot, necessarily the home. They used the existing home as sort of the justification, but the justification isn't the divergence itself. So I still think the divergence carries and is permissible, even if the justification has technically changed. Certainly, the commission could feel differently about that, or maybe, you know, but that's sort of always on us of, you know, when we're reviewing these divergences, to understand that, you know, if conditions change at final, sometimes the justifications can change. I'm not necessarily concerned about the lot being there. Like I said, if there was no house there ever and we were doing that lot, I probably wouldn't be a fan of it. But they also wouldn't be doing it if that was the case, probably. So I think retaining one of the existing homes and having a home there, I don't think is going to really substantively change the character of the neighborhood, and it didn't push them over the density envelope. Certainly if it was a density issue under the code that they're being reviewed against, you know, I'd also have more concerns. But especially because the tower's there, if anything, it might help maybe soften the fact that the tower's right there.
I have a second question, it's also related to that lot, because the tower is there. Is like, is there no second, like an other diversion that will have to be asked for because it's in that tower fall range? I mean, the new house, because if it's something that's already there, that's one thing, but you're placing something that wasn't there before.
Not that I'm aware of. The telecommunication towers, a lot of times, enjoy a lot of like zoning exemption protection under Ohio law. So we tend to not get into them very much. So I would view this as a condition that basically already exists. Yeah, the house has been taken down, so for a few months it hasn't been there, but the old house was in the fall zone, and the new house is gonna be in the fall zone, so I'm not sure anything really materially changes.
So who
in the
owns,
big picture.
who owns the telecommunications tower and,
Communications company.
okay, they do.
Yeah,
But
but
you,
they- yeah.
who owns the land? You?
Well, ultimately, the homeowners association.
I mean, right now,
Excluded from
right now,
the-
it's, yeah, but right now, it would be your land, and it's an easement on your land for that tower.
Correct, and the easement will transfer over to the HOA once the development's complete.
But before we got involved, the former owner basically granted him right without any further lease payments to own that tower there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is if there was lease
No longer
payments
any lease
associated
payments.
with the tower.
And that happened long before
Yeah,
our acquisition.
that tower's been there for, I think, quite a while.
Then also I want to address something that we've seen here before in the commission, that like owners buy lots and then the improvements are not immediately done, like I'm talking, like the parks or the trails. There was once a playground, I think, that was like, that they had to come in front because it was not built and people had bought lots and unknowingly that there was like a playground gonna be there. Like,
Yes.
is your intent to,
Jim dealt with that one too.
your intent? Basically to, like, once you start phase one, are you gonna immediately incorporate that park into your building process, or you're gonna first carve out the lots? Like, what's, like, what's
We
the?
want to get the amenities in as quick as possible. They're a selling feature.
Okay, yeah.
It unifies the community. I think it makes a statement. We put a lot of time and effort into each one of these different parks in terms of the tree species, how we want to do it, how we want it to function in the community. So for us to not do it upfront it makes no sense to me. So that's something we're going to be aggressive on right off the bat.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure, because, I mean, I've dealt with some other places, like some other developers, and these things, like, because there is no time limit on these development plans, that these things eventually don't even happen. So I just want to make sure that there will be prioritized.
And that's the biggest nightmare for a developer or builder, to show that plan to potential purchasers
Yeah.
and then not do what he said he's gonna do.
I mean, you guys do great things, so I have no doubt. I just want to have this on record.
A lot of it obviously falls to construction timing too and the staging. So to Jim's point, as soon as they can get in there and be sure that they're not gonna have to do any significant work in the area anymore, they'd probably like to get those up because it is a sales feature.
The one carrot,
Very high-end, they're very high-end amenities, so.
the one carrot I do have on that fact is the issuance of the zoning permit for the house. So I've never had issues with them, but I have had other development situations where I've had to tell them, you need to get this done, or you may find you not getting permits in a timely manner, if at all, until this gets resolved. So that tends to get movement, especially if it's already under contract.
Do you have any other questions? Okay. Do you want to do a divergence review?
The commission has reviewed each divergence request against the standards set forth within section 2707 of the township's zoning resolution to determine if such a request is warranted. Per section 2707.07, unless a deviation from development standards is specifically approved as a divergent, the same shall be complied with. I would also like to add the text from section 901.01A, which states, the township recognizes that with increased suburbanization and population growth come increased demands for well-organized residential areas that take into account unique natural features, contemporary land use concepts, and a balanced residential environment. The planned residential district is intended to promote flexibility of land development for residential purposes while still preserving and enhancing the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the township. Divergence from section 1608.04 to allow window wells to encroach up to 4 feet into the side yard setback, so long as there is not an opposing window well on the adjacent property within 3 feet of the former. Do these divergences promote or not have an adverse impact on A, the conservation and protection of the natural resources, scenic areas, wildlife habitat, and historical and unique natural features on the land, of the land? No adverse impact. B, the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the present and future inhabitants of Genoa Township. No adverse impact. The quality of life within Genoa Township through the protection of the total environment, the prevention of nuisances and hazards, and the provision of adequate light, air, and convenient access of property. No adverse impact. The assurance of the compatibility of land uses which are either adjacent or in proximity to each other. No adverse impact. E, the orderly development of all lands within the township to its appropriate use. No adverse impact. F, the most appropriate use of land to facilitate and provide adequate public and private improvements. No adverse impact. And G, consistency with the recommendations of the official Genoa Township Comprehensive Plan currently in effect. No adverse impact.
Everyone on the commission agree with this?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chair, I would point out that we have asked for another divergence tonight.
So, if you don't mind me jumping in real quick on that point, and I don't have an issue with it, I'm just thinking procedurally, and I'm spitballing here, so forgive me. Do we think that needs to be a separate divergence, or do we think we could just, as part of this, modify previous divergence 1, which was the divergence regarding, and then just build it in as, with the exception of this? It might be easier as opposed to adding just another divergence, that we just add a couple exceptions.
We can see that. We'll just modify number 1.
State that, right, for the record?
Yeah, I would state that on the record as part of the, even though it's not an official additional divergence, that we're modifying previous divergence 1 to add the following exceptions, and you may want to write those out.
Yeah, so what do we want to accept them from? So obviously the.
And I would make sure the applicant is in agreement with
landscaping
your
one?
verbiage.
The landscaping section?
Yeah, so
And also if lot owners can get, I mean, you talked about putting barns up.
Yeah, I would
So-
say, so, again, forgive me for driving the bus here momentarily. I would say the two exceptions you're looking for are, A, an exception for the street tree species. And exception B would be any changes to the 2020 zoning resolution, which would be more advantageous to residents of the plan in regards to accessory structures, decks, sheds, pools, and other improvements of that nature. Is that,
is it a motion or is it?
Chairman, and I thought we were discussing divergence 3 and modification of divergence 3 because we're now moving a house, which I fully support, because I
We
support
can
that.
definitely,
We have modified that.
Yeah.
I mean, every divergence we're adding or modifying from what was approved at
Yes.
the time of zoning.
Okay.
You should motion.
Suggestion,
Yeah.
Mr. Elder, is to approve the divergence amendments as indicated in the revised development text, which indicates,
so what you would need to
Page
do
31.
is, in the script, under the, if you were to do an approval, you can see in the script, and after you do the main part, on page 5, there's a section that talks about the divergences. That incorporates it as part of the motion for approval.
okay, yep.
What I would do would just supplement, we have 1 written down, but you would just need to add 2 and 3.
Okay.
And just make it clear that 2 and 3 aren't necessarily new divergences, that you're modifying previous divergences, 1 and 3. Under zoning case number 2020, I'm sorry, I have it here somewhere, let me find it. 2022-06, as follows, and then just state how they're changing. And I do think that'll be that's the best practice, and it will help codify the record and answer any of those
Zoning
questions.
case 2020-06.
Yep.
Okay.
Modification of, so like, again, I'm spitballing here, probably be, item 2 would be modification of previously issued divergence number 1 under zoning case 2022-06, which had authorized the development to proceed under the October 31st, 2020 zoning resolution to add the following exceptions. A, street tree species, and B, the whole thing that I just rattled off about the advantageous code. And then number 3 would be modification to previously issued divergence number 3 in ZC 2022-06, which had permitted a lot to be located within the required open space setback, to change the justification that, and then whatever your justification was there about the existing, I think Mr. Tysman said it better than I probably could there, so.
It's from the development text.
That's sort of how I envision the motion being made.
Not the tree, the tree species I understand, but how would you formulate that in smaller, because it's so broad?
Yeah,
I think it's for residents. I think the street
The
trees.
lot, the
street trees are
lots
street
will be
trees.
treated,
The street trees are street trees.
Yeah.
What
That-
Joe suggested only applies to residents.
residents of the plan will be reserved the right to,
Apply.
Apply the
Yeah.
more current.
the zoning resolution in effect at the time of a permit application.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If more, yeah,
If more advantageous.
if more advantageous.
Unless, yeah, correct. That's not gonna open the floodgates to all of a sudden they can
We can't. come
change
back.
the fundamentals
We
of
can't
the
come
plan.
back then.
No. If they wanted to come back and revise the plan, either they've, they've got to talk to me, and either I have to approve it administratively, or they would have to come back through the formal process, depending on what it was.
Do the approval motion? I mean, if we want to do an approval motion, is everyone?
Is there other discussion? Don't we have to move on for discussion with regard to my divergent
No,
review?
you can move to a motion,
Okay,
since you're going to read it.
great. See. There it is.
I guess I'll-
I got it. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just gonna throw out one more thing if you don't mind.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
I know some people heard that there was open comments in here, so just, I wanna talk procedurally real quick. If this does get moved forward tonight, just so you know, the applicant will be revising the materials before they go in front of the trustees, so a lot of those outstanding comments they know are still out there. They will still have an opportunity to change and get a clean copy.
Some of them, all of them.
All of it. He's just assured me on the public record he's gonna get them all. Cool. So I just wanted to more for the edification of the public about the procedure of, they will have the opportunity to get some of those cleaned up before the trustees see it.
And you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, there was nothing in here I didn't think that they couldn't clean up.
Great.
So we're looking for a motion.
Yeah, I move to recommend approval of the following to the Genoa Township Board of Trustees. The subject final development plan application, including all plans and materials submitted by Romanelli and Hughes to construct 150 single-family dwellings on approximately 129.43 acres of property located generally west of Rome Corners Road, including 3570 Rome Corners Road, pin 31721005003000, 3774 Rome Corners Road, pin 31721005008000, and 31721005009000. 3912 Rome Corners Road, pin 31721005009001. 3922 Rome Corners Road, pin 31721005010001. And Robe Corners Road, pin 31721005010000. Currently zoned planned residential development, also known as Mira Luna, zoning case number 202602, incorporating exhibits A through H and any commitments made by the applicant during this hearing.
Which is basically getting all the Joe's comments.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can incorporate that if you want, but it's not necessary.
I further move to recommend approval of the following divergences from the Genoa Township zoning resolution. 1, divergence from section 1608.04 to allow window wells to encroach up to 4 feet into the side yard setback. so long as there is not an opposing window well on the adjacent property within 3 feet of the former. 2, modification to divergence 1 for zoning case 2022-06 to allow residents of the plan to be under the effect of the current zoning resolution at the time of approval. 3, it would,
I would do street trees separately, because they're gonna install them.
what am I saying with street trees?
Just street tree
Exception,
species.
street trees.
That's it.
Species.
Including street trees species. 3, modification to divergence 3 for zoning case 2022-06 to allow for the relocation of a home at 3912 Rome Corners Road to the site at 3990 Rome Corners Road and lot on which it will be situated fronting on Rome Corners Road at the southern end of the property. This motion to recommend approval of the subject final development plan application is based on the following findings of facts and conclusions.
The previous read A through G of the divergence review. We went over this.
Yep. Including A through H of the divergence review.
Anyone wants a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Before I do roll, for maybe, Mr. Fisher, are you okay with how they worded the divergence there? I just want to make sure the applicant was on the record. He's nodding his head, so yes. Okay, sorry. Roll call, Mr. Adler. Ms. Krieger. Mr. Teichman.
Yes?
Ms. Van Howe.
Yes.
Mr. Bernard.
Yes. The motion is approved. It carries. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So moving on to other business. I don't know if there is any, Joe?
I have nothing else to bring before you this evening unless you have something you want me to answer.
There is nothing coming for next month or?
Oh, no. This was going to be the only one if it had been continued, but
There is, it's also, is there a chance we can get new bundles for the?
the resolution, yes, I'm sorry. It did slip my mind to get it for tonight. I also thought it might confuse you having the new code and this old code working alongside. So we will have that by the next meeting.
Okay.
Do you want to have the July meeting since I have no applications for you?
I mean, is everyone fine with skipping the July meeting?
There's no other business to tend to.
No, no. Except if you guys want to speak on something that's, this would have been the only reason. But yeah, we will, we'll forfeit the July meeting then.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make sure we get that canceled.
Okay. So, when will be the next meeting then?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What date will be the next meeting then?
The date? Since there wouldn't be a July 13th meeting, the next meeting would be August 10th.
The 8th or the 10th?
10th.
You're right, 10th.
So the next meeting of the zoning commission should be on August 10th. Anyone wants to adjourn? If there is no other discussion. Who wants to make a motion to adjourn?
I will. Sure.
Just read it and.
Move to adjourn this meeting at 8:44 PM.
I second.
The meeting was adjourned at.
You have to do the vote, but you can just do a voice vote.
sorry,
You don't
yeah.
need to do roll call.
Anyone agree, how do you say?
All
that?
in favor?
All in favor? Aye. There you go. The meeting was adjourned at 8:45 PM. We don't have that in the other place.